What if the person you think you are is just a fraction of who you truly are? What if years of conditioning and surviving in a challenging world have left you clinging to strategies and beliefs that mask your truest nature? I'm Catherine Duca, psychotherapist and self-esteem coach, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? A show that looks beneath our psychological masks and uncovers our profoundly messy, beautiful, brilliant, tender-hearted selves. Join me as we go in search of the hidden power of our true selves. I'm so glad you're here.
And you all know that is so true. I am so glad to be here with you tonight. Welcome to Who Do You Think You Are, a podcast dedicated to helping you learn how to have the highest regard for yourself, how to live from a place of genuine self-respect and self-love, and how to make yourself a priority in your own life. Meet me here each week for curated tips and strategies designed to help you drop your psychological masks, connect with your truest essence, and simply live life more easily. Because we know that when we approach life in this way, we naturally and effortlessly and organically have more room, more generosity, and more love for others. And to your listeners, when have we needed that more than this very day? And on this very day, I want to wish you a very happy Pride Day. I know it's 9 p.m. Eastern and the day is coming to a close and the month is coming to a close. But today and every day, we celebrate love, identity, and community. And may we continue to uplift, support, and affirm one another, and doing all we can to make this a world that works for everyone, where each person can thrive. So let that be our collective intention and prayer. And that said, I am so glad to be here with you live. As you may know, I've been away the past 3 weeks, getting a little R&R, doing some traveling. I'm still on the Dolce Vita vibe. So if I seem a little subdued, I have one foot still in Italy time. Such a beautiful part of the world. I am an Italian American and so proud of my heritage and so proud of where my ancestors come from. And it was a beautiful, very rich, meaningful experience. And boy, did I come away with an even greater appreciation. I say La Dolce Vita, the sweet life. And there's an expression there, the sweet, I don't remember the exact Italian word, but a sweet life of doing nothing, something like that. And when the Italians say the sweet life of doing nothing, they mean that even when they're working, they bring a I don't know, a vibration of love and appreciation and sensuality to everything they do. When they hand you an envelope at the post office, when they serve you a meal, when they give you directions, everything I found was done with such a warmth and a wish to make someone happy. So I still have, one foot in that world. But here I am on the East Coast here of the United States, and I am talking about a topic tonight that is it's a very important topic. You might say it's an obvious topic. I don't know. You'll have to see. But it is certainly a topic that underlies everything we talk about here on Who Do You Think You Are? And in fact, underlies my work, and I would say the work of any psychotherapist, any healer, and that is the process of introspection. Introspection. So the title of this particular episode, you can see it there on the screen, is Self-Reflect Better. Self-reflect better. There are good and there are better ways of self-reflecting, and I'm going to talk about that Um, when I was on vacation, as is often the case when we get away from our regular routine and our regular environment, we have the opportunity to think, hopefully to reflect. And I was doing a lot of that, actually. And I was noticing in my thoughts what my thoughts were. In other words, I was thinking about what I was thinking about. And that gave me just an added clarity and appreciation for introspection, self reflection, and the whole process of being willing to face oneself, to look within and be brutally honest, though always with compassion. We always say that here. Um, let's take the brutality, please. There's enough brutality in the world. We don't have to swim in that. But I think a large part of the brutality in life comes from the externalization, if you will, of the oftentimes harshness or cruelty that goes on in our own minds. When we are harsh with ourselves, when we are, so self critical, brutal, even cruel to ourselves, that has a way of radiating outward. And so I oftentimes think that the collective brutality and cruelty that we're experiencing at this point in history, it's not the only time. There have been many other times. But I think that's really nothing more on a certain level than the out picturing of the critical voice, the, the the brutal voice, the drill sergeant voice that we have in our own minds. So I always like to say, let's do what we can to meet ourselves with compassion and kindness and understanding and curiosity. I think we're capable of making the most change when we start out from a place of acceptance, self acceptance. So, how do we get here? And how do we self reflect better? Well, I want to talk about some terminology to begin with. And this is a little bit of double Dutch, double Dutch jump rope. I'm going to weave together three different threads, if you will, that definitely overlap, but they have important distinctions. And they are introspection, self reflection, and blind spots. Blind spots. I love, love, love working with people's blind spots. And when I say people's blind spots, I mean other people's blind spots, not my own. I'm not a fan, although I'm getting better, of working on my own blind spots. So let's define those terms. So what is introspection? I think we all have a general idea of what that is. Introspection is the process of, and this requires a certain willingness on our part, the process of going inward, turning our attention, turning our curiosity inward, and being willing to ask ourselves probing questions. Probing questions. Whys? What? What will happen if I do this? What will happen if I don't do that? What is my motivation for saying this or not saying that? So introspection. So that's, I would say, the bottom tier of how we become self-aware human beings. So introspection. Then there is self-reflection. So of course there's overlap because you can't self-reflect without introspecting. But self-reflection is specifically the willingness and the process of intentionally going within ourselves and examining our own thoughts, our thought process, our beliefs, our feelings, our experiences, to gain insight and understanding into ourselves. What prompted me to have this topic tonight Um, Probably a few things, but in general, I, talk to my clients, and my clients, like most people, certainly like myself, are very keenly aware of what other people may be doing to them. You know, we're all aware of if we feel someone has slighted us or overlooked us or avoided us or gotten snarky with us, or on and on and on, right? Who among us is not aware when that happens to us? But I think it is less prevalent for us to be looking at when we might do that to others, when we might do that to others, when we are sarcastic or insensitive or curt or snippy, or displacing anger. I mean, the list is very long, but I think it's this notion of what we do to one another. I think it needs to be, because it naturally is, a two-way street. And we need to have our awareness go both ways, coming and going. So not only what is done to me, but what do I do to others? And I've learned that this process of self-reflection is not a destination. It is a way of showing up. It's a way of being. It's a way of being with ourselves. Because as we've said so many times here, the most important relationship we have, the most important relationship we have in terms of earthly relationship on this plane is what? That's right, the relationship we have with ourselves. When we wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and we can't turn our brain off, that's between us and us. There's nobody else there talking to us, is there? That's our inner dialogue. And that us is inescapable. So if we are down on ourselves or doubt ourselves or, dare I say, loathe ourselves, we don't feel we're good enough, if we feel we're inadequate, well, that's our relationship with ourselves. And how we feel about ourselves is, I think, one of the biggest psychological lenses that we have. You go to the eye doctor and he or she says, puts the lenses on, better one, better two. And, you keep going back and forth to see what. So this lens of how do I feel about myself and how do I see myself in the world becomes the lens through which we look at the world. And I promise you this, if we're critical with ourselves, we're going to be critical with other people. And if we don't do that, oftentimes we go the complete, opposite. The psychological pendulum swings the other way. And we're like, oh, I'm so critical of myself. I'm going to be extra, extra people pleasy to the rest of the world, or extra, extra, extra tolerant. Now, there's nothing wrong with being tolerant. Of course, there's nothing wrong with being accepting of other people. But if our come from place is this pendulum that swings the other way, that's just the other side of the same coin. And there's a term for that in psychology. It's called overdetermined. That's an interesting term. You don't hear it very much, but overdetermined. It kind of means, one runs the risk of overshooting the runway because it's an overcompensation. You have the critical voice within, so you're going to be anti-critical of everybody else. It's a little too, if you know what I mean, right? It's a little too. By the way, if you're listening live, I invite you to participate in the chat. When you do that, you, along with me, co-create, I think, a better show. So I invite you to interact, leave comments, ask questions. Let me know if you have a different point of view. Let me know if you completely disagree. If you have another take on things, I would love to mix it up with you. So just type anything into the chat. So anything I talk about here and anything I talk about with my clients, I try to self-reflect and look at where I may have that particular challenge in my life, or where I, in this case, where I might not have been as introspective as I needed to be, perhaps should have been. I don't like to use shoulds that often, but I do what I can to, and I think many of you do as well, to hold yourself to a standard, to be as accountable to yourself and to others as you possibly can. So anyway, there we were in Italy and having wonderful meals and learning how to make the most delicious pasta. And I was reminded of an incident in my life. This was a long time ago, maybe 25 years ago. And my partner, Dawn, and some of you may know from a past episode, who didn't make me breakfast one day decades ago, and I had my meltdown on that. Well, this one day, Dawn went so out of her way to make me a delicious pasta dish. She made the homemade, this is a controversy whether you call it sauce or gravy. In my family, we called it by the Italian name suga, S-U-G-I, suga. That's what we call it. So Dawn spent the entire day. I was working that day. This happened to have been a Sunday afternoon. I was working that day. Anyway, when I came home to the fantastic aroma of this delicious sugi on the stove. And she had put all the magic ingredients in there. And it's really it's a whole morning, it's an hours long process. And she had everything all beautiful on the table. It was set beautiful, flowers, gorgeous, you know. And I hadn't eaten all day, and I'm hungry, and I'm excited, and I'm just loving it. Now, I'm not proud of this, okay? I'm confessing on myself, but you know, this will get to the heart of the matter. So I sit down and I twirl some, might have been linguine, and I'm twirling it, and I smell so wonderful, and I have some, and I say, don't judge, okay? Don't judge. I say, don't judge, please, okay? I said, where's the taste in this sauce? You know, with this gesture, where's the taste in this sauce? Can you imagine? Now, I say, can you imagine 25 years later? And we laugh at this now. But in that moment, I didn't know I was saying anything hard to believe, right? But I didn't know I was saying anything untoward, you know? I didn't know I was saying anything terrible and unkind. I would have said that to myself. Why? Because my father, who in many ways was a wonderful, loving, generous, kind man, but could also be the most critical human being ever. And that's something he would have said to my mom or to, you know, a relative. And he probably would have said it to himself as well. And I, even though had I heard him say something like that, would have objected. Dad, how could you say something like that? The fact of the matter is, I internalized, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I internalized some of his critical nature. And while I like to think of myself as a kind person, a tactful person, you know, a person who cares about other people's feelings, in that moment, eating that pasta, I was a son of a gun, wasn't I? And my critical voice, I have to say, was a blind spot. And this is what I want to mention here, because if you're willing to be introspective and self-reflective and ask yourself your whys, you're going to bump up against, without realizing it, your blind spots. Now, what is a blind spot? A blind spot is anything we do or say or believe for which we have no knowledge or of which we have no knowledge. In other words, we're the last person to know that we have a particular pattern. Okay. Let's say we have a pattern of being sarcastic, and maybe we disguise it as humor, but it's sarcasm. And sarcasm can carry a note of anger or hostility, but it's dipped in humor. So, and oftentimes there's a wit about sarcasm. Um, and there's okay sarcasm, and I think lots of comedians are sarcastic. And then there's more hurtful sarcasm, right? I think you all would agree with that. And so you might be the last to know that you tend to use sarcasm, or you tend to be a sarcastic kind of a person. And it's outside of your awareness. So that's what blind spots are. The things that we do or say or believe that exist outside of our conscious awareness. So we're the last to know that we engage in that behavior. But I can tell you this, the people in your orbit, the people closest to you, they are keenly aware of your blind spot. So there I was. Where's the taste in this sauce? And Dawn, who happens to be one of the kindest people I know and the most accepting as well, didn't say anything right away. Probably she was stunned, but I saw the expression in her eyes, and it didn't really register with me 100% consciously at the time, but thankfully, I believe in self-reflection. And so I sort of made a mental note of that expression, and I kept eating, and it was okay. The meatballs were delicious, I have to say. Okay, not the point. Stay focused. But it was only in hindsight that I realized that was really not a good move and very bad form. And it was definitely worthy of a heartfelt apology, which I think she has accepted. And as I say, we talk about that to this day, and we laugh about it. But the fact remains that if I don't watch myself, and this is the truth, if I don't watch myself, I can channel John Duca. I can. And I can, words will come out of my mouth before I can catch them and rein them in that are sometimes sarcastic, but are critical. So that takes vigilance on my part. I have to sort of get up in the morning and remind myself, because I think personally, when I lapse into those patterns, I've sort of lost my right mind. I've lost my insightful mind. So I need to remind myself to get back into my sensitivity and get back into the person whom I really want to be. So this gets at, I said introspection was the bottom rung. The subflooring, if you will, is a vision of who we want to be and how we want to be. And if you've been listening to this show for any length of time, you know that who we want to be and who we strive to be in this audience, I think, is a self-aware, awake, present, alive, responsive person. Self-aware, awake, alive, present, and responsive person. And while I say all the time, it is not anyone's responsibility to, resolve my unresolved issues. It's not anyone's responsibility, nor is it mine to resolve anybody else's. It is nice to be aware and tuned in and sensitive to other people's challenges or their blind spots. So if you notice someone has a blind spot and you decide that you want to gently point it out, well, the operative word is gentle. And what's under that is, what would be your motivation for pointing it out? Now, your motivation can be varied. It can be because you don't feel comfortable necessarily with what the person said or how they delivered what they said. So you might want to point it out for your own benefit. Hey, this didn't, I have to let you know, it didn't feel comfortable. I thought I heard some sarcasm there, and I felt myself bristle. Do did I hear you correctly? Was that your intention? And then just pause. Just hold it there. Don't pile on. Don't, talk about your assumptions. Just let them know how it landed with you and give them a chance to correct themselves, clarify, double down on what they said or what they meant. But in presenting it that way, you create, I think, a non-judgmental space for the person to reflect on what they said and what they meant. So that's when it's for your benefit. Now, sometimes you might want to do it for the person's benefit. Listen, you know, I don't know if you're aware of it, or you may not realize it, but I've noticed something that I'd like to share with you. Are you up for hearing that? Or may I give you some feedback? Are you in the mood to hear it? And if you ask that question, you want to be able to hear the answer, because if the person isn't in the mood, they just don't have the bandwidth, or they're afraid you're going to be critical, respect that. Respect that. Blind spots get to be blind spots because we've tucked away something uncomfortable. We've tucked away something uncomfortable in that blind spot. And then we've unconsciously sort of, moved it out of our conscious awareness. So we're acting that way, but we don't get it. We don't notice it. We're not aware of it. So it can be a tender spot. So you want to be tender when pointing it out, right? So I'll pause there and let me say hello. I think we have a couple of people in the chat. Just Judy, welcome, Just Judy. You're welcoming everyone. It's good to see you. Judy, you go on to say, it is so easy to unwittingly hurt someone, even loved ones, perhaps especially loved ones. Well, yeah, I have to tell you, I don't think I would say to um, a anybody else, actually. So listen to this. I don't think I would say to anyone, certainly not a friend, on the periphery of my friend circle, certainly not an acquaintance, certainly not a stranger. I would never say something. So I wouldn't even say it to like a restaurant or anything. But I said it to someone I care about. So that's a whole other podcast topic, Judy. Um, displacing. And that is a defense mechanism. It's called displacement. And it's exactly what it sounds like, displacing onto someone a feeling or an interpretation or an assumption that is really meant for someone else. So if I'm angry at someone from my past, dead or alive, and I've never felt comfortable enough to voice my, say, anger toward that person, it's parked somewhere in me. And when something is parked and suppressed, it picks up more energy. That's the paradox of suppression. What we think we're protecting ourselves and others from by tamping down, stuffing down, eating over it, drinking over it, shopping, interneting, what have you, over it, we think we're doing the other person and ourselves a favor. No, we're not. And why is that? Because as Debbie Ford, who wrote The Dark Side of the Light Chasers, May she rest in peace. She passed a few years ago. She was a very well-respected New York Times author and visionary. She would say, when we suppress our emotions, it's like submerging a beach ball underwater. You can only do that for so long. And if we're suppressing this beach ball and that beach ball and the other beach balls, how many beach balls can we handle before they pop up, she would say, in our face in the most inopportune time? So beach ball submersion is another way of saying, um, you know, stuffing our emotions until they're under such pressure that they pop up. They break through what is called in psychiatry, psychology, a repressive barrier. Right? We have like an invisible barrier in our mind between our unconscious and our conscious. And that suppressed stuff just leaks through. And guess what? We, on some level, we know better than to do that with strangers. Sad to say. Sad to say. Because a stranger will tell us off. Maybe. You know, a stranger, we will not endear ourselves to that person. And we know it. And we don't like rejection. And we're allergic to rejection, most of us. So what do? If we're not careful and we're not on our game, as I was not at that time, it leaks out and hurts the very people we love. So, Judy, you're absolutely right. It's so easy to unwittingly hurt someone. And that's what apologies are for. That's what amends is for. That's what self-acknowledgement is for. Listen, I didn't realize it at the time, but I reflected on it and I heard myself say something that I'm really, I'm really, I don't like and in myself, and I'm upset about it. And I want to apologize to you. You didn't deserve that snarky remark. And I want to let you know that I know that. And just let it be. Let the other person digest that. If you're waiting for someone to make it all better and say, oh, that's okay, I hardly noticed. That's really not accountability at its best. When we hold ourselves accountable, we are also giving the other person the room and the acceptance to have their own reaction. And it might be a little uncomfortable for you. Okay. But if you're the one, or if I'm the one who said the snarky thing, I set that in motion. The least I can do is give the person, the time they need to digest what I'm saying and see how they feel about it. We owe them that, don't we? So, Judy, absolutely right. Janine, welcome. Good to see you. How do you find a blind spot in yourself? Does it always require someone else holding up a mirror, or can we find it independently? That is the question of the night, Janine. Most of the time, because by definition it's outside of our awareness, most of the time it takes another person's reflecting it back to us to know. But this is interesting. The way it can be mirrored doesn't necessarily have to be with words, or if you are an attuned person, or you're willing to practice becoming an attuned person, then you're going to be looking at nonverbal cues, and you're going to be making eye contact with the people you speak with, and you're going to notice when they're, I tell you, when you get to be really attuned and you really appreciate eye contact, you can see, I think they're called preorbital muscles. You can see very, very slight and subtle movements in the eyes. But anyway, you might see something not so subtle. You might see somebody kind of wince, or, get frowny. A nonverbal can be a cue. Oh, did I just say something? Well, I just thought I was being funny. So the person doesn't have to really spell it out for you. You can play with 2 and 2. Oh, I made that joke. I noticed her expression. Now, one can say, which this would not be, I don't advocate this. She can't take a joke. She's so darn sensitive. I wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that because that's not self-reflection. That's reflecting for the other person. That's other reflecting. You see the look in the eye, you see the wince, you see the looking away, and then you ask yourself, did I do something there? Did I do something there? And then you play it back in your head. She said this and I said that, and then she winced. I think maybe my delivery was a little sharp. And if you're not sure, you can ask the person, hey, when I made that joke, in thinking more about it, I don't like how that sounded. And I just want to acknowledge that and apologize. Okay. So Janine, that's a very important question. In a pinch, I would say the majority of the time, someone mirrors that back blind spot out of our awareness, but we can pick up on cues. And if we're willing, we can ask ourselves, I said a couple of weeks ago, ask yourself one more question, and that will lead to something very often. Thanks for that. Thanks for that question. I think I saw Dawn. Dawn, the meatballs were delicious. How does self-reflection though primarily about looking at oneself, help us relate to others? How does self-reflection, though primarily about looking at oneself, help us relate to others? Another good question. Well, that goes back to what I said earlier, Dawn. I don't know if you heard this, but the relationship we have with ourselves, how self-aware we are, how much, how empathic we are with ourselves, how much we appreciate our own struggle. And when I say appreciate, I mean value our own courage, our own struggle, value the courage to be in our own struggle, value our desire to become the best version of ourselves. When we do that, that's our self-directed lens. When we do, that's also the lens we look out from. So when we are kinder to ourselves, when we're more insightful, when we understand, there's more than, there's more to people than we just see on the surface. Everyone has a story. The person who cut you off, they have a story. The person, who was, rude on the checkout line, they have a story. Because you have a story, and how maybe difficult it's been to come to terms with your past, your childhood, your traumas, your unresolved issues. When you appreciate all that goes in to becoming a self-actualized human being, I think automatically you turn that appreciation outward, and you're like, I get it. We're all out here doing our best, and we all trip up. And I like to think that if we can help each other in an atmosphere of mutual enhancement, in the spirit of give and take, in the spirit of I want to make things safe for you, and I hope you want to make things safe for me. It doesn't mean we're responsible for each other, but let's make the atmosphere such that it's more likely to bring out the better in each of us. Let's have a relationship, a friendship, a partnership that's mutually enhancing. Right? So I think when we do that, Dawn, I think it helps us relate to others with more kindness and more grace and maybe a bit more elegance. So thank you for that. Judy, another comment. Sometimes a movie can raise our awareness about when we're hurtful, disrespectful. Yes. And you also say you find calling people honey or dear in restaurants or grocery stores to be disrespectful. Okay, let me, Judy, respond to the first comment there about sometimes a movie can raise our awareness. Absolutely. oftentimes in my work with clients, I will prescribe, if you will, a certain movie because it embodies oftentimes a theme that they're working on. Um, wow, two movies come to mind for me as having a profound effect on my concept of myself and how I behave toward others. Um, these are old movies. Were they both Academy Award winners? I don't know. Ordinary People. Ordinary People. I think in the 80s. Mary Tyler Moore and who else? Hutton. Do I want to say Timothy Hutton? Judd Hirsch. A wonderful, wonderful movie about a woman who did not feel her feelings. And she experienced the death of one of her sons. She had two sons, and one of them died. They were both in a boating accident. One survived, and the other son didn't. And this was a woman who was so brittle. She did not feel her feelings. And try not to feel your feelings about that. And even though I've never lost a child, I don't have a child, there were similarities in her stoic nature and her refusal to feel vulnerable. And I'll never forget my reaction in the movie theater when I saw that film. I had a profound emotional reaction because I saw myself in her as being just so in refusal. I didn't know it was refusal. I just thought this is how I am because I did not introspect or self-reflect. I just thought this is how I am. I'm just a stoic person. And other people who are crying all the time, they're kind of they're kind of needy people. This was my mindset at the time. Boy, did I need an awakening. And I have to say, Ordinary People was a catalyst in getting me into psychotherapy at that time. And the other movie was An Officer and a Gentleman. There too, I've never been an officer, I've never been a gentleman, but there again, a personality type that did not do vulnerability. You see, here's the thing. When we refuse to be vulnerable, and what does it mean to be vulnerable? Vulnerability has a connotation that many people feel is a weakness. So they don't go there. But really, it takes courage to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is a willingness to be accessible, approachable, rather than walled off. It's the willingness to feel pain, yourself, your own pain, and the pain of others. It's the willingness to feel kind of mushy instead of all take chargey. It's granted, there's a time and a place, but it is so crucial to be able to be vulnerable. And on that note, I'm going to take a short break. I have managed to let us go 3/4 of the way without doing that. Let's take a short break. Let's digest this. Let's reflect on things and come back and tie this up. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network. We'll take a short break. Stay with me. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, I'm Catherine Duca, and you're listening to Who Do You Think You Are? And we are talking about the processes of introspection, self-reflection, and blind spots. And we're looking at how to deliver, if you want to point out someone's blind spots, how you can do so gently, compassionately, and directly, and how you can receive the feedback if someone attempts to point out your blind spot. So these comments and questions are all really wonderful. Thank you so much. Because the topic of each episode is a spin-off from my newsletter that comes out every Sunday morning. By the way, if you'd like to receive a copy of it, just email me, Catherine@catherineduca.com. That's Catherine@catherineduca.com. And just put in the subject line, add me. Add me. and I'll do that immediately. I'll get you on the email list. A question came in this morning. Was really just a comment more than a question. The person said, "I'm embarrassed about my blind spots." Right? That's all that was said. I'm embarrassed about my blind spots. And I have to say, when I read that, I took a moment, and I could feel how someone could feel that way. Um, it may not be pleasant to think that someone else sees something about you that you don't see in yourself. So there can be a momentary, um, ouch or pinch with that. But I want to remind that listener and anyone else who feels a little embarrassed or a little ashamed about the blind spots that I don't know anybody who doesn't have them. I don't know anyone who doesn't have them. Not your visionary, not your spiritual leader, not your, well-known, guru, um, not any psychotherapist. We all have blind spots. It's part of human nature. And once you accept the fact that we all have blind spots, then I think it helps to be less judgmental of other people's, because you say to yourself, wow, I'm sure I know I have them, right? I know I have them. And so the way I want someone to be kind and gentle with mine, I am going to be the same toward others. So I would say your willingness to acknowledge and explore your blind spots, think about it, is a sign of courage and strength, not weakness, not weakness. I had a blind spot one time, and I mean, so many come to mind, but like, just listen to how they show up. Um, so I bought a house with my partner, but I think that I really wanted this house. My partner, uh, liked it also, but I really wanted this house. And the house, I mean, listen to the house was a 5-bedroom house. We're 2 people and a small dog, and a 5-bedroom house. 5 bedrooms, 2 living rooms. I don't know how many bathrooms, 6 fireplaces. Um, that house, that house. I wanted that house, and we bought that house because I thought my whole life that, oh my goodness, if the day comes when I could have a house like that, when I could afford a house like that, I will think that I mean, these weren't the words that I used, but if I unpack what was in my head, this is the dialogue that would have come out. If I have a house like that, that means that I am someone. That means I'm someone. Because people who are someones have a 5-bedroom house, I thought in my mind's eye. Now, why did I think that? I thought that because, um, my parents were very hardworking people, and they were really, they had a family business, and I, I would say middle class, but my parents didn't really, the money went into the business, and they were always trying to play catch up, and they provided for my brother and me, but we lived in a very tiny apartment, and it happens to have been an apartment that I was, talk about embarrassed, I was embarrassed of. So I never, ever, 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 ever in my life had a friend over. And I had some embarrassing moments when someone would want to come over and I would have to make an excuse. So I went my whole life dreaming and fantasizing that if I had a magnificent home, that would somehow cancel out the pain and embarrassment and shame I felt for living in that tiny less than adequate for 4 people garden apartment. And so my reason for getting that house was a whopping overcompensation for feeling like there was something wrong with me and ashamed because of the apartment, the home I lived in. And had I had more self-awareness at the time, I would have done introspection and asked myself, do I really need a 5-bedroom home? That, by the way, we lost our dog in twice because the place was so, what was I thinking? But in my fantasy of what it takes, of what it would have taken to be a person who was good enough, a big house like that was in the equation. That was the equation. So you see, lack of insight, this is what I want to close with. Lack of insight, lack of connecting the dots, lack of knowing our motivation leads us to do things that may not be, and oftentimes are not, in our best interest. So let me turn that and make a more positive statement. Cultivating self-awareness, understanding our reasons for doing what we do to the best that we can, at least asking ourselves the question, living in the question, even if we don't have the answer. That is a much more productive, and I'll tell you, a much less costly way of inhabiting the life you have. Every decision, every choice point is based on some need, some wish to have pleasure, some need to avoid pain. In fact, research tells us that there's more motivation, there's more weight on the things we do to avoid pain than to bring ourselves pleasure. In other words, we'll do anything to avoid pain. And I think that as a child, I was in a fair amount of pain, being, feeling the way I felt about our apartment. And I never talked about it. I kept it to myself. It was one of my beach balls. I just suppressed it and hoped it would go away all the time, believing that if this fantasy came true, I could somehow delete that pain from my life, from my childhood. And my inner little girl would feel happier. What happened was she didn't feel happier because it didn't really touch the boo-boo. It didn't really explain or touch what was painful about that aspect of my childhood. And in fact, it gave me another problem, a very, expensive home. Uh, you know, I mean, obviously we didn't need to be in a home like that. It was ill-suited. We were not one with that home. So I ended up having 2 problems, trying to overcompensate for the one problem. You see how that goes? So insight, healing is releasing pain, but insight is understanding how being in that pain informed our choices, informed and informs what we do and how we relate to others. So insight is crucial. Self-reflection is crucial. Being willing to look at our blind spots, being willing to hear when they're pointed out, and being willing to point them out with gentleness. These are all very, very important, meaningful aspects of self-love. And we here on this network, and certainly on this show, are self-love builders. We are, self-love. When Tama Keeves was on, what did she call self-love warriors, something like that? Salmon who swim upstream. All right, this is who we are. So let's take that into the world this week. Let's affirm one another. We had a month devoted to affirming LGBTQ, individuals and their rights. But let's affirm how challenging it is to be a good human being, to be a clear human being. Not easy. Takes work. And that's what we do here. So I hope you love it as much as I do. I hope you've gotten something from this show. And I hope it has helped you to self-reflect better. So I've enjoyed this time. Thank you so much. You honor me when you allow me to come into your earbuds. I will meet you back here live next week. And incidentally, I wanted to make mention in the 2 of the 3 weeks that I was out, my partner Dawn Freed and I did a 2-part series, 2 conversations on pulling the veil back on what it's like to be a psychotherapist and what oftentimes goes through our minds when we sit with a client. Judging from the feedback, many of you found it valuable and interesting. So if you haven't had a chance, I invite you to catch it. Do like and share. You know that helps the algorithm, and that's what makes the world go round these days. So, dear listeners, I wish you well. I'll meet you back here next week. You're listening to Who Do You Think You Are on New Thought Media Network. See you next time. Take care.